Excuse me, sir. Is the Earth round or flat?
Flat.
Why do you say that?
Because of the firmament.
What's the firmament?
Do you even read the Bible, bro?
What up, what up? You are now listening to Once Upon 785, the dopest podcast in the Midwest. I'm your host, Georgie350. Let's get into it, bitch. What up, and welcome back to another episode of Once Upon 785, God is real and the earth is flat. I'm your host, Georgie350, and I would like to start with some announcements. First off, I'm having to record this on my phone because Riverside's messing up on my computer. So, for starters, there's that. And if you've been thinking about updating your wardrobe, I got 3 places you can go. First is habits365.com, which I'm wearing right now. As you can tell, it's pretty fly. Super dope hoodie and beanie. Again, go to habits365.com and use promo code Georgie350 and you'll get 15% off your order. Next, you can go to reaperapparel.com, use promo code Georgie and get 10% off your order. And last but not least, you can go to cocoburry.com for your premium sweatsuits. All different colors, and again, use promo code Georgie350 to get 30% off your order. And I gotta turn my mouse on. My apologies. And if you would like to watch this video instead of just hearing it, for $5 a month, you can go to patreon.com/onceupon785 and you can get the video version of this episode. Also, if you would like to email me, you can at onceupon@proton.me. And now, let's get into today's episode. Today's episode, we're going to talk NASA and their occult origins and how they're one of the biggest scams robbing millions from Americans every single day. Then we're going to talk Operation Fishbowl, and then we're going to end with the fake moon missions. All right, so first off, NASA, or the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, is an independent agency of the U.S. federal government responsible for the civil space program. Aeronautics research and space research, established in 1958. It succeeded the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, to give the U.S. space development effort and distinct civilian orientation, emphasizing peaceful applications in space science. It has led most of America's space exploration programs, including Project Mercury, Project Gemini, the 1968 to 1972 Apollo moon landing missions, the Skylab space station, and the Space Shuttle. Currently, NASA supports the International Space Station, or ISS, along with the Commercial Crew Program, and oversees the development of the Orion spacecraft and Space Launch System for the Lunar Artemis program. So, as you can tell, I was just doing research on this, and it's just insane how much work they put into NASA and all the fakery. I think, don't quote me, but pretty sure we pay $93 million every single day for NASA's budget. And they'll say that it's only how many ever percent of the actual federal funding, but Whatever, they're getting so much money for bullshit. Now, let's dive into the occult roots of NASA. I found this on aplaintruth.info. So they start off and they say the focus of this first part of a series is based on a principle that is indefensible if you were caught. Fraud vitiates everything it touches. Vitiates. In short, once fraud is detected, everything that sits upon it is now in question. Your credibility is shot. Who would disagree with the logic of found fraud destroys the validity of everything? It's reasonable, predictable, and has the power to instantly change the direction of one's perception. Even those were held scared. Sacred. Held sacred. Not the best reader, but don't judge me. Fraud has no limits by those who engage in it, and it's been around a long time. Do you think real fraudsters just stop at one fraud, or do you think they keep going and going until they die or get caught? The answer is a simple one. Why would you ever stop lucrative, fraudulent activity if you haven't been caught? So the chance for systemic fraud, once initial fraud is found, becomes a vital certainty. To further muddy the waters, NASA was founded by satanic worshipping occultists and black magicians. This is not idle rumor, but fact. NASA is a military, Hollywood, pseudoscience, satanic cartel whose true aim is to use taxpayer funding to promote and profit by developing and deploying pseudoscience technology and methodology. The first fraud, in my opinion, is the true origins of NASA and the cast of characters that had significant influence. They say to go to NASA and search for them and you'll find whitewashed bios and no information available. It's no coincidence that NASA has been erasing and trying to rewrite its true origins. The mighty pillars of scientific certainty that NASA supposedly sits upon are actually satanic black magicians of the occult. This is probably a small trivial fact that is omitted in today's school curriculum. NASA has sprouted from the likes of the self-acclaimed wickedest man in the world, Aleister Crowley, mass mind control black magician, Satanist L. Ron Hubbard, and uber occultist black magician, Satanist Jack Whiteside Parsons, to begin the early formation of NASA. In addition to the unholy trinity, there were two more later additions to the NASA Dream Team, Wernher von Braun and Walt Disney. All the elements were in place to create one of the greatest financial and theological frauds in human history, NASA. They go on and say early Dream Team. Crowley, Parsons, Hubbard. Parsons and Hubbard idolized Aleister Crowley and were avowed Satanists. Taken all together, NASA certainly did not sprout from humble beginnings. L. Ron Hubbard said it best. You don't get rich writing science fiction. If you want to get rich, start a religion. Fate is not without its ironies. NASA got rich because of science fiction, and for many people, NASA is a religion. The complete NASA Dream Team. Jack Whiteside Parsons. He's an occultist, black magician, Satanist, head of the Ordo Templi Orientis California Agape Lodge. Aleister Crowley, 33rd degree Freemason, leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis, black magician, Satanist, the Beast. L. Ron Hubbard, mass mind controller, black magician, Satanist, founder of the Church of Scientology cult. Wernher von Braun, ex-Nazi, director of the German V-2 rocket program, and recruited into the U.S. under Operation Paperclip, which likely he was the most normal of the bunch. Walt Disney, occultist, mass mind controller, black magician, Illuminati pedophile, Freemason, and the founder of the Ordre des Moles. They go into the evil dark side of all things Disney. And I'm just gonna go over this just because I think it's pretty cool. Walt Disney's fucked up. This is Ordre des Moles. As the capstone of the NASA Dream Team, the adoption of the pseudoscience provided the template that makes the NASA hoaxers' rockets go up, up, and away. NASA didn't have to look far from a sterling example of pseudoscience. The Soviets have perfected the craft of pseudoscience as both the US and the USSR engaged in the fake Cold War. The Cold War was pre-engineered by the Khazarian Rothschild Zionist bankster cabal, the Khazarian Mafia, after World War II, and had financial control of both governments. Not surprisingly, both countries went on a spending rampage, and billions of taxpayer dollars were funneled into the mythical Masonic space race with the Soviets. The father of pseudoscience was a man named Trofim Lysenko, who worked under the Jesuit-trained mass murderer Joseph Stalin. Lysenko eventually became the official scientific voice of Russia, and no matter how absurd his assertions were, to disagree would mean a trip to the Gulag. Pseudoscience is not science, but science and political science combine to generate revenues by creating false scientific dogma reinforced with repetitive brainwashing. NASA has studied Lysenkoism well and has deceived the world by their sleight of hand, but thanks to the internet, we've had a chance to catch up and actually analyze what we've been shown and told from the all-knowing portal to the stars, NASA. They say, today's incarceration of NASA is a military, Masonic-controlled entity that acts as the sole gatekeeper to inform about the cosmos and our place in it. To think NASA's black magic and occult origins haven't been refined by Freemasonry is certain naivety. To think that Freemasons and NASA don't have black magic, you're obviously naive. If you're not, okay, I don't need to say. They say if you're not familiar with secret societies, click here, but we're not going to click there. They're going to talk more about the Khazarian Mafia. Vast industries controlled by the Khazarian Mafia have been spawned that orbit around NASA and the military-industrial complex. Take a small sampling of the top aerospace and defense contractors from 2014 and look up the major shareholders. And then they give you investorsmorningstar.com and look for 4 institutions: Vanguard, BlackRock, Fidelity, or State Street. Roughly 80% of the industry is owned by these Khazarian Rothschild subsidiaries. On top of that, take a look at the various investment funds and you'll see the same 4 companies. Raytheon, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics Corp., United Technologies Corp. are just a few that you might know, and there's obviously hundreds of more that work with them. The Masons of NASA take in billions of taxpayer dollars only to redistribute it amongst Khazarian Rothschild majority-owned companies and subsidiaries in the military-industrial complex. The level of compartmentalization. Geez, I'm just sucking with the words. among these interconnected companies is so tight, everyone is on a need-to-know basis, which means only the top of the structure knows the final desired outcome. Everyone else is virtually kept in the dark, just the way NASA likes it. NASA constitutes the biggest black hole ever. They got discovered, crossed out, and then it says created. They constitutes the biggest black hole ever created, especially in regards to funding. NASA is the king of black ops, with technology and advanced military craft that civilians have no idea exist. Billions of dollars have been embezzled by NASA and are reallocated for other nefarious uses by the Khazarian mafia. In return for our obedience and gullibility, we get a fake fairy tale saga about the cosmos, directed and produced by Hollywood at a fraction of the actual cost. It's certainly more profitable to fake it than make it. The line between Hollywood and NASA is virtually indistinguishable to the unwitting observer. And then it says Disney, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street Corp. Hollywood has cashed in big time and perpetuates the worship of NASA through the endless genre of space sci-fi movies. Don't be surprised to find the same institutional majority shareholders of major Hollywood companies and subsidiaries such as Disney, Comcast, MGM, Time Warner, DreamWorks, Sony Entertainment. Again, you can go to invest.morningstar.com and look up these companies. Vanguard Group, Fidelity, BlackRock, State Street, they're all majority shareholders. And thus, Hollywood becomes a de facto propaganda machine for NASA. The controlled major mass media is also controlled by the Khazarian mafia, and hardly a day goes by without an article written about the incredible exploits of NASA and its quest for life in the void of space. One problem, it's all bullshit. So, that's the end of The Occult Roots of NASA, Part 1. I think I did have a Part 2. They start off by saying NASA's 5 undeniable frauds. The occult and satanic roots of NASA, the Apollo moon landing hoax, 1986 Challenger disaster hoax, the International Space Station hoax, and the ongoing involvement and manipulation by Freemasons. And they have a little asterisk and they say, of key significance was the very same majority shareholders of key military and aerospace contractors are also majority shareholders of major Hollywood production companies and virtually all mass media outlets in America. So they talk about, again, how NASA whitewashes the bios of true individuals that NASA was incubated from. And they said, search the NASA database and you'll find Jack Parsons, sheep dipped as clean cut rocket wunderkind. Seems like they left out his public manifestos exalting Satan. I wonder why. L. Ron Hubbard isn't mentioned by NASA, though he was a satanic cohort of Parsons and a struggling science fiction writer. More importantly, it's the first known union of science fiction and science in the pre-NASA years. The wheels of pseudoscience were ready to roll, especially when Walt Disney joined the fold along with his vast production resources. It's not rocket science, it's simple. Fake it and pocket the rest. It goes through and gives their credentials again. Parsons was an occultist, black magician, Satanist, head of the Ordo Templi Orientis, idolized Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley, 33rd degree Freemason, leader of the Ordo Templi Orientis, black magician, Satanist, the Beast 666 wrote the Book of the Law and considered to be the most evil man ever conceived. L. Ron Hubbard, mass mind controller, black magician, Satanist, fledgling science fiction writer, founder of the Church of Scientology, idolized Aleister Crowley. Werner von Braun, ex-Nazi director of the German V-2 rocket program and recruited into the U.S. under Operation Paperclip. Walt Disney, occultist, mass mind controller, black magician, Illuminati pedophile, Freemason, and the founder of the Ordre des Moles. Disney provided the massive sound stages and brought Hollywood into the fold. And then we got the Apollo moon landing fraud. The overwhelming evidence that has accumulated makes it clear that these were staged, and no credible proof as today shows that anyone has ever been there. No credible proof as of today shows that anyone's ever been there. The Van Allen radiation belts that surround the Earth would have fried them to a crisp had they truly gone. Combined with the ultra-pathetic, unexplained loss of the Apollo 11's flight information, supposed reels of video and photos plus all flight telemetry data, they lost it all? That's bullshit. Such valuable property would have been under strict lock and key. And again, there's unrelenting video and photos of Masonic gestures and symbology proving the continuity of occult underpinnings. Continuity of occult underpinnings. Number 3, they got the Challenger disaster fraud. In 1986, the Challenger space shuttle exploded 75 seconds into flight. 7 astronauts were allegedly killed, and you could imagine people lost their mind because they showed it on natural television. I can't remember who it was, if it was Reagan, but one of the presidents, they said, nobody's going to believe anything until they see it on the TV. That's why with this, they had it on the TV. 9/11, they had it on the TV. Anything that's absolutely crazy, and they want to try to get everyone to believe with it so they can pass all these bullshit laws. They put it on the TV. You gotta unplug from that shit. Nah, I'm getting off track. They said they showed it on national television. The whole nation mourned as elaborate services and memorials were held to honor the fallen. The only fallen are the people that have fallen for the fake Freemasonic hoax. 6 of the 7 astronauts have been identified or still alive, and some are even using the same last names. This is irrefutable. You can go look this up on TikTok, YouTube. Yeah. It's insane. International Space Station fraud. The International Space Station, just like everything else brought to us by NASA, is fake Freemasonic hoaxes. A complete fabrication done with special effects, models, pools, zero-G planes, and various camera tricks. The plethora of YouTube footage revealing underwater bubbles, scuba divers, green screens, and overt Masonic hand gestures is hard to ignore. The other smoking gun is the actual design of the ISS, which more resembles a habitrail for a hamster over a space laboratory. The mere fact there are no airlocks between models seems ridiculous. Coincidentally, the models are elongated so they can easily be simulated in a Boeing 737 0G plane. Number 5, they got Freemasons in space. Confirmed Freemasons are John Glenn, Gordo Cooper, Edgar Mitchell, Buzz Aldrin, Don Easel, Gus Grissom, James Irwin, Walter Schirra, Thomas Stafford, Paul Wheat, and those are just the astronauts that have been positively identified as Freemasons. This obviously doesn't include the Freemasons that are working for or behind the scenes of NASA, which is very significant. If you're not familiar with, oh yeah, they got a link. If you're not familiar with Freemasonry and blah, 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 but we're going to have an episode over Freemasons and secret societies. They say, please understand the implications as we move forward. Because of the systemic fraud already revealed, NASA's credibility is totally shot. Any statements, announcements, projects, missions, technologies, etc. must all be looked at with new lenses. Emotionalism must be replaced with skepticism and condemnation to bring things into focus. The Khazarian Mafia and their satanic minions of mass psychopathy has brought the world to the brink for their implementation of their dystopian New World Order. Out of chaos comes order is their diluted mantra, despite being the actual creators of the chaos they will emerge from. Talk about a snake eating its tail. They end with, so if you want to put your faith in NASA, then you have to put your faith in other things, like JFK was shot by the lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, and not the CIA. The Federal Reserve Act did not give the Khazarian Rothschilds control of our currency and banking system. The Federal Reserve, the USS Liberty was not attacked by Israel in 1967. Or the 19 jihadist Muslims actually piloted the most sophisticated commercial jets, 2 Boeing 767-200 ERs into the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. NASA is a military agency that is under the control of the creators of worldwide chaos, the Khazarian Mafia. The whole NASA construct is falling apart as people are waking up to the fraud and deception that has been foisted on humanity. I wonder if the hole they've dug for themselves is now bigger than the hole that the thrusters of the Apollo 11 should have created when it landed on the moon. I guess I forgot about that one little detail in this studio. The Khazarian Mafia saw the opportunity to steal billions of taxpayer dollars under the guise of satellites and rocketry. They introduced a fictional entity called a satellite, as per Arthur C. Clarke, which would revolutionize the world in so many key industries and sectors. There was just one problem. Again, it's all bullshit. And I forgot, I wanted to talk about satellites. So I have a little bit of this article, and then I got one more about satellites, or satelloons. The origins of satellites came from the mind of the famous science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke. He wrote the 1945 proposal for geostationary satellite communications. He was a high-level Freemason as well as a homosexual and self-professed pedophile. Throw in Satanism and you've got a heck of a guy. Arthur C. Clarke was writing science fiction stories along with other notable sci-fi writers, Philip K. Dick, Robert Heinlein, and L. Ron Hubbard. Clarke did initially claim to know Hubbard, however later he denied that statement and thought Hubbard to be completely crazy. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go on to the next one. This is from Vedic Cosmos. They say satellites don't exist. Again, if I had my Riverside working on my computer, I was going to screen share all this because there's a bunch of crazy pictures, but I'll just go ahead and link it in the show description. They say, in considering spaceflight, we should understand the limitations of rockets. Without atmosphere to propel, there is no thrust, so a rocket simply loses propulsion and begins to descend. Hence, despite the grandiose display of rocket launches, all rockets simply begin to level off and descend. What goes up must come down. Usually, rockets end up in the ocean, out of sight, out of mind, where they've harmlessly splashed down. Meanwhile, the astronauts, who never actually were in the rocket, are busy filming in a secret studio or a zero-G plane to mimic the sitcoms they use to deceive and entertain the public. So public displays of rocket launches occasionally happen, yet most are falsely announced, yet you never even really take place. They're going to outline the basic space hoax fraud parody. Okay. They say below are listed 4 cases of egregious fraud that completely invalidates NASA as a credible agency and instead is a purveyor of pseudoscience and Lysenkoism. That one guy, Lysenko? Lysenkoism is used metaphorically to describe the manipulation or distortion of the scientific process as a way to reach a predetermined conclusion as dictated by an ideological bias often related to social or political objectives. The American taxpayer derives virtually no benefit from NASA's existence and alleged scientific contributions derived by supposed explorations and experiments in space. Absent of any other sources to verify, we have had to prostate ourselves to the so-called experts, despite irrefutable evidence that NASA is nothing more than elaborate financial embezzler and pseudoscience peddler. Okay, they got NASA's 4 undeniable frauds. The Apollo moon landing hoax, and they have a video, but I'm not going to play it. They got the Challenger disaster hoax video. They got the space station hoax. And the ongoing involvement in manipulation by Freemasons. Okay. Okay. They say the Sputnik 1 was launched first in 1957. Shocking, fooling the world, and Explorer 1 soon followed in 1958, the year NASA was created. NASA was also created to militarize space and the atmosphere below it. But why? Simple, in order to conceal the deceptions of the Zionist corporate mafia and their Freemason minions. The corporations needed to secure the perimeter and operate above any jurisdiction. All information above our heads skyward was now in the hands of NASA as the official source. In other words, the propaganda machine was created. They say it's laughable when you realize we're solely reliant on just one source for all information regarding the cosmos, NASA. Along with the controlled major mass media, NASA is free to dispense as much CGI, Pixar, Photoshop, fairy tales as fast as we can gobble them up. I guarantee the Satanists of NASA have been laughing a long time about their ruses. However, they're being exposed more than ever as incompetent pseudoscience degenerates when real scrutiny is applied. And they're going to say, seemingly unrelated, in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed and is now totally off limits, backed by military force. The North Pole is also militarized, though no formal multilateral agreement exists. Still, any attempt to traverse either will result in an immediate military expulsion and possible jail time. To date, no human has ever traversed Antarctica. Ever. Think about that for a moment and consider the absurdity of it. There is still a continent that has never been explored and we're not allowed to access it. Why? But you know why, because we've already talked about that. They say, even the Antarctic Treaty wiki page, uses a satellite composite image of Antarctica. Where's the real photo? Hold on. NASA can somehow send a satellite to Ceres, 257 million miles away, without a hitch, but the deepest hole ever drilled is only 7.5 miles out of 3,959 miles to the center of the Earth. The other 3,952.5 miles is unknown, and pseudoscience fills in the blanks with no true hypothesis, just bullshit. Man hasn't even been to the bottom of his own ocean, Challenger Deep. So if we haven't mastered our own domain, how is it possible to send a probe to Ceres and retrieve such stunning images? Because it's simulated, that's why. The only real images of Ceres that exist reside where they were created, on the hard drives of NASA computers. We will return to the aspect of Antarctica a little later, so consider it a seed that has been planted. Okay, let me see. Oh, I didn't know this. The Zionist corporate mafia saw another opportunity to steal billions along with their fiat currency central bank thievery and debt-based slavery. That opportunity was satellites launched into orbit. They had their man, Freemason Arthur C. Clarke, waiting in the fold to ride shotgun, writing sci-fi genre as if it were science. He was a key piece in creating the exploding interest in space and the great mysteries of the cosmos. He was the perfect asset that NASA needed. His sci-fi prowess elevated his fictional ideas as seemingly plausible and scientific. Behind the veil of NASA, a symbolic baton was passed to Clarke, who becomes the key to both the Apollo fraud and the ongoing satellite fraud. And this is what I didn't know. How convenient it was that Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey was made into a movie by Stanley fucking Kubrick in 1968. And the Apollo 11 moon landings were faked by Kubrick in 1969. One could surmise that 2001 A Space Odyssey was a dry run prior to Apollo. 2001 A Space Odyssey was the premiere for the Apollo hoax, since we know from part 1 that the ISS is fake. Then they say they posit that all satellites are illusory and don't exist. I don't know about that. I guess this guy, they say there's staunch evidence that satellites do not even exist. And then, but I mean, in my opinion, I think they have satelloons, but satellites, no way. Satelloons? Yeah. They go on to say, people remark, yeah, but I saw the International Space Station. I had someone tell me that the other day. Oh, I was just like, are you fucking serious? You seen the space station? Get the fuck out of here. Consider for a moment that what you saw was an inflatable replica. In World War II, the US made wide use of inflatable tanks and rubber airplanes to deceive Hitler's reconnaissance efforts. From high altitude, you cannot make the distinction between real or rubber. The point is that the military has a history of this type of deception. And yeah, no shit, I had no idea that they used inflatable fucking tanks in World War II. You should check it out. I'll put the link in the description. William Cooper has ever ascended permits space. No man has ever orbited, landed on, or walked upon the moon in any public known space program. How many manned missions to a planetary body could they fake? Just enough to set the table for the real goal. Thousands of fake satellites launched into space and big profit margins. This was a much safer and secure revenue stream for the corporations, and having never returned to the moon makes the case. They say, look at some of the companies involved in the satellite sector. You got Vanguard, State Street, Fidelity, and BlackRock. Okay. Yeah, they're going more into the satellite sectors. Okay. But, I mean, they believe that, they say satellites aren't real, but I believe that, again, like they have satelloons. NASA, I think it's NASA and the DoD have the highest, they're the highest buyers of helium. They control all the helium. That's why we don't have no hot air balloons and blimps. People used to fucking ride on blimps everywhere. Cheap. And then what was it? The Hindenburg? They've been fucking us over for a long time. Okay. This is going to go into more like reasons why it's completely not fucking possible that they went to space and space travel. I got this from the same place, Verdict Cosmos. They say, I would like to draw attention to the fact that space travel is not possible by rockets due to the fact that propulsion needs atmosphere. Also, navigating in near vacuum conditions is not possible, as a rocket will widely spin, not having sufficient atmosphere to stabilize any motion. So what we see is a rocket, computer just spazzed out. So what we see as rockets approach thinner and thinner atmosphere, they simply begin to turn and bear down. There is no orbit in outer space. Only lighter than air vehicles can float in the atmosphere. Otherwise, you need enough propulsion to maintain at least an equal force of thrust to counter the downward bearing force due to mass. And this is why space satellites are a hoax, and there's only lighter than air vehicles situated in the atmosphere, not space. And they got some pictures. Some of these things look fucking crazy. They say, we know NASA claims they can use rockets in space, but considering NASA's reputation as a known bullshit faking space travel in order to fleece the unsuspecting people of their government taxes, who in their right mind would take anything they say is reliable? The following is scientific proof that rockets will not work in space. Why doesn't the propellant generate any force? It's expanding, right? There's something known as free expansion, or the Joule-Thomson effect, named after James Prescott Joule and J.J. Thomson, two of the founders of the field of physical chemistry. Free expansion states that when a pressurized gas is exposed to a vacuum, the gas expanding into the vacuum without any work being done, the gas is not pulled or sucked into the vacuum, nor is it pushed out of the high-pressure container. In other words, no work is done, no heat or energy is lost. This result has been experimentally verified numerous times since its discovery in the 1850s. As if free expansion wasn't enough to invalidate the theory of rockets producing a force in a vacuum, there is also a result from thermodynamics. Work equals pressure times change in volume. And they say that's easily found searching Bu equals PV. So if the pressure of a system is 0, then the work done by the expanding gas into that system is 0. Gas expanding into a vacuum doing no work agrees with free expansion. This can also be understood as the gas meets no resistance as it exists into the vacuum and thus transfers neither heat nor energy to its surroundings. If the gas loses neither heat nor energy, then it has no work. And they say, one might argue that a gun creates a recoil effect, yet this analogy is not applicable because we're talking about rockets, not revolvers. Short answer, yes, a gun recoils in space. No, the analogy does not apply to rockets. And they give a longer version, but I'm not going to read that. They say the gun analogy does not apply to a NASA-type space rocket as their pressurized gas escapes without doing any work at all. A NASA rocket is a gun without a bullet. NASA claims to shoot into outer space, but they are simply nonsense rascals firing blanks. So, the law of thermodynamics and free expansion, those are like irrefutable. You can't fuck with that. So now I want to talk about Operation Fishbowl. The names that they use are literally how you can tell. Think of a fishbowl. Just put that in the back of your head. Operation Fishbowl was a series of high-altitude nuclear tests conducted by the United States in 1962 as a part of Operation Dominic. The tests were designed to gather data on the effects of high-yield explosions on ballistic missiles, radar, and communications. They say the purpose was to generate data on the effect of high-altitude nuclear explosions on radar, communications, and the creation of auroras. It was located on the Johnston Island in the Pacific. Their weapons were named Thor, Streepy, Nike, Hercules. What the fuck? Then it just talks about the different ones. They had Starfish Prime, a 1.4 megaton detonation at an altitude of 400 kilometers. Checkmate, a low-yield detonation at an altitude of tens of kilometers. Think about it. They're taking bombs and shooting them up. What are they shooting at? Tens of kilometers. Yeah, they say the test resulted in several failures, including the destruction of the bluegill missile in flight due to electronics failure and the malfunction of the rocket motors for Starfish and Bluegill Prime. That's insane. And then on beforeitsnews.com, they got Operation Fishbowl and the Firmament, which is obviously what they were trying to break through. They say Operation Fishbowl was a series of high-altitude nuclear tests conducted by the United States in 1962 as part of a larger operation, Operation Dominic, nuclear test program. Yeah, they talk about the test and bluegill, starfish, Eureka. The Thor missile was used to lift warheads into near space to conduct high-altitude nuclear explosion tests, which were collectively called Operation Fishbowl. So they were literally shooting it high altitude. That's crazy. But nobody wants to talk about this shit. They say these tests were scheduled quickly to respond in kind to the Soviet resumption of testing after the tactic 1958 through 1961 test mortarum. 20 of these shots were to test new weapon designs, 6 to test weapon effects, and several shots to confirm the reliability of existing weapons. The tests were conducted at an altitude of 91.3 miles, 41 miles downrange from Johnston Island, and only 3 kilometers from the Air Zero point. And if you want, they have a video on here. You can watch that. But we're not going to watch that. And now I want to wrap it up with the moon mission hoax. This is from thisverse.com. 10 reasons the moon landings could be a hoax. And they say the theory that the moon landings were hoaxed by the US government to assert their victory in the space race over Russia is something which has grown in popularity over the time. Recent polls indicate that approximately 20% of Americans believe that the US has never landed on the moon. After the Apollo missions ended in the 70s, why haven't we ever been back? Only during the term of Richard Nixon did humanity ever land on the moon. And after Watergate, most people wouldn't put it past Trixie Dick to fake them to put an American in good standing in the Cold War. So they got their list of 10 things. Number 10 is the waving flag. They say conspiracy theorists have pointed out that when the first moon landing was shown on live television, viewers could clearly see the American flag waving and fluttering as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin planted it. Photos of the landing also seem to show rippling in a breeze, such as the image above, which clearly shows a fold in the flag. The obvious problem here is that there's no air in the moon's atmosphere, and therefore no wind to cause the flag to blow. They say NASA's put forward a bunch of bullshit. They said the flag was stored in a thin tube and the rippled effect was caused by it being unfurled before being planted. Other things, the ripples caused by the reaction force of the astronauts touching the aluminum pole, which is shown to shake in the video footage. Bullshit. Number 9. Lack of impact crater. So the claim goes as follows. Had NASA really landed on the moon, there would be a blast crater underneath the lunar module to mark its landing. On any video footage or photograph of the landings, no crater is visible, almost as though the module was simply placed there. The surface of the moon is covered in fine lunar dust, and even this doesn't seem to have been displaced in photographic evidence. Much like the waving flag theory, however, the lack of impact crater has a slew of potential explanations. NASA maintains that the module required significantly less thrust to in the low gravity conditions than it would have done on Earth. The surface of the moon itself is solid rock, so a blast crater probably wouldn't be feasible anyway, in the same way that an aeroplane doesn't leave a crater when it touches down on a concrete airstrip. The moon's not a solid object. It's plasma. Space plasma. Number 8, they got multiple light sources. This one's hella talked about because they did it on a stage. I mean, on the moon there's only one strong light source, the sun. So it's fair to suggest that all shadows would run parallel to one another, but this was not the case during the moon landing videos. It's a conspiracy theorists suggest that this must mean multiple light sources are present, suggesting that the landing photos were taken on a film set. NASA's attempted to blame uneven landscape on the strange shadows with subtle bumps and hills on the moon's surface, causing discrepancies. This explanation has been tossed out the window by some theorists. How could hills cause such large angular differences? Yeah, their picture's broke. It shows the lunar module's shadow clearly contradicts that of the rocks in the foreground at almost a 45-degree angle. Number 7, and probably I think what should be number 1, the Van Allen radiation belt. In order to reach the moon, astronauts had to pass through what is known as the Van Allen radiation belt. The belt is held in place by Earth's magnetic field and stays perpetually in the same place. I think it's just firmament. Firmament, Van Allen radiation belt, same thing. The Apollo missions to the moon mark the first ever attempts to transport living humans through the belt. Conspiracy theorists contend that the sheer levels of radiation would have cooked the astronauts en route to the moon, despite the layers of aluminum coating the interior and exterior of the spaceship. NASA's countered this argument by emphasizing in a short amount of time it took the astronauts to traverse the belt, meaning they only received very small doses of radiation. Bullshit. The next one's the unexplained object that you can see in the astronaut's helmet. It totally looks like a stage light. Yeah, they say the object appears to be hanging from a rope or a wire and has no reason to be there at all, leading some to suggest it's an overhead spotlight. It's clearly. Slow motion walking and hidden cables is number 5. They say that if you take the moon landing footage and increase the speed of the film times 2.5, the astronauts appear to be moving in Earth's gravity. As for the astronauts' impressive jump height, which would be impossible to perform in Earth's gravity, hidden cables and wires have been suggested as giving the astronauts some extra height. In some screenshot outlines of alleged hidden cables can be seen. Yeah, you can see cables in hella footage. Number 4, lack of stars. I mean, they got this picture of the Earth and oh my god, it's so dumb. And they say one compelling argument for the moon landing hoax is the total lack of stars in any picture they took. There are no clouds on the moon, so stars are perpetually visible and significantly brighter than what we would see through the filter of Earth's atmosphere. The argument here is that NASA would have found it impossible to map out the exact locations of all stars for the hoax without being rumbled and therefore left them out, intentionally falling back on an excuse that the quality of the photographs washes them out, an excuse they did actually give. Some photographers are high quality, however, and yet still no stars are shown. Certainly weird, considering you can take pictures of stars from Earth in much lower quality and still see them. Insane. Number 3 is a picture of a rock that's got a clear letter C on it. and it's from the moon landing. And a lot of people say that it's a prop. The sea is used as a marker by a film crew. They just turned the rock the wrong way, exposing the sea. Yeah, NASA says they blamed photographer developer for adding the letter as a practical joke, while on the other hand saying that it may simply have been a stray hair which got tangled up somewhere in the developing process. Get the fuck, how are you gonna get hair from what, out their spacesuit? Number 2, the layered crosshairs. The cameras used by the astronauts during the moon landings had a multitude of crosshairs to aid with scaling and direction. These are imprinted over top of all photographs. Some of the images, however, clearly show the crosshairs behind objects in the scene, implying that photographs may have been edited or doctored after being taken. Photograph shown above is not an isolated occurrence. Many objects are shown to be in front of the crosshairs, including the American flag in one picture and the lunar rover in another. He keeps saying, conspiracy theorists have suggested NASA printed the man-made objects over a legitimate photograph of the moon to hoax the landings. Although if they really planned on doing this, then why they use crosshairs in the first place is a mystery. I mean, that is true. And number 1, they say, is the duplicate backdrop. They say the 2 photos from the Apollo 15 mission shown above clearly have identical backgrounds despite being officially listed by NASA as having been taken miles apart. One photo even shows the lunar module. When all photographs were taken, the module had already landed, so how can it possibly be there for one photo and disappear in another? Well, if you're a hardcore conspiracy theorist, it may seem viable that NASA simply used the same backdrop when filming different scenes of the moon landing videos. NASA has suggested that since the moon is much smaller than Earth, horizons can appear significantly closer to the human eye. Despite this, to say that the 2 hills visible in the photographs are miles apart is incontrovertibly false. And then it goes into the Stanley Kubrick theory. But we already talked about Kubrick. Oh yeah. I did want to talk about this. They say, some people say that a group contends that Kubrick was groomed by the government to film the moon landing long before this, and that 2001: A Space Odyssey was a stage practice run for him. So what evidence might support such claims? Well, apparently if you watch The Shining, another Kubrick picture, you can pick up on some alleged messages hidden by Kubrick to subtly inform the world of his part in the conspiracy. The most obvious is the child's Apollo 11 shirt worn in only one scene. Another supposed gem is a line written on Jack Nicholson's character's typewriter, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," in which the word all can be interpreted as A11 or Apollo 11. If you aren't convinced yet, Kubrick made the mysterious hotel room in the film number 237. Guess how many miles it is from here to the moon? 238,000. So divide that by 1,000 and minus 1, and you've got an airtight theory. It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. And I mean, I just learned like 2 years ago that Red Hot Chili Peppers and Californication, they say space may be a final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Like, man, it's mind-blowing. But that is going to wrap up today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review. If you would like to come on the show, again, you can email me at onceupon785@proton.me. If you want the video version for $5 a month, head over to patreon.com/onceupon785. And don't forget to bitch. Yeah. Middle of the map, can't swear I'm at. You can say I'm whack, it's just not a fact. Can't tell if I'm awake or I'm in a dream. I just know I'm geeked on amphetamines. Never was a habit, now I gotta have it. Never was a fiend, now I am an addict.